Friends, today in this video, we will be talking about all the React.js hooks in one single whiteboard video. So we will be getting to understand about all the hooks with real life examples in this whiteboard video. So please hit that like button, subscribe the channel as well. So you will be able to understand all the React.js hooks which are available inside React.js. So let's start this tutorial. So now the very first hook, guys, which is called as UseState Hook. It's a very popular hook and it is also very widely used. It is used to declare the data which is called as state variables inside our React.js application. So also we can update the state as well. So there is a second method which is available in order to update these state variables according to the application. So we will be looking at the examples in the next slide where we will be looking at the examples in detail with source code. Now you can see that, guys, this is an example of use state hook here. So we have declared a variable for the user and basically there is a method in order to update this state which is set user. Initial value is John. We are printing out this value which is inside double curly brackets. So the username is John Williamson. You can just see on the screen. So this is a very simple example of how to declare the state variable and how to print that state variable inside your JSX in React.js. So now, guys, we'll be showing an example. Basically here we will be declaring multiple state variables with the help of this use state hook. So first of all, as you can see, we are declaring the user hook here. So we have declared set user for the method. Initial value will be John Williamson and the second value will be for the age. So this will be the parameter age and the method in order to update this. So set age, initial value will be 25. So now we need to render these values inside our JSX expression. So we can simply inside our curly brackets we can print out the user and line break. After that we can print out the age. So the username is this and the age is 25. So on the right hand side you can see all these values are printed out. Now, guys, we will be taking the example where we will be updating these state variables that we have declared in the previous slide. So for this, guys, you can see we have user and the age variable and we are displaying this on the screen. So now we will be adding these two buttons out there. First button will be updating the username and the second button will be updating the age. So here we are binding, you can see we are binding the on click listener here. So whenever we click this update user button, this function will execute, which is change user, and whenever we click the update age button, this function change age will be executed. So now we will be defining these functions at the very top, guys. So basically these will be arrow functions. So basically whenever you click these buttons, automatically this event handler will be fired and automatically this function which is update user. So simply it will simply call this hook use state hook method which we have defined for the username, which is called as set user. We will simply call this and here we will pass the name which we need to update. So you can just define any name. I'm defining Adam Collins, and similarly we will doing it for the age as well. And basically we will be calling set age method, and here you can change the age number as well. So now whenever you click the buttons, if you click the update user button, the name will be changed from John Williamson to Adam Collins, and whenever you click the update age button, the age will also change from 25 to the age that you have mentioned inside your method. So all these variables will be updated. So in this example we have seen how to update multiple state variables. So this is example. So now, guys, we will be showing you the correct way to update the state variables inside your React.js application. So as you can see here, we are using the method which is set user and set age in order to manipulate the name and the age. But here we will be dependent upon the previous value. So here we will be inside this function, we will be having this parameter of previous name, and we will be taking this as an argument to this function. And then using this previous name, we will be changing this value like this. You can see that we are taking this as argument which is previous name, and similarly we will be doing it for the age as well. So this argument will be automatically passed. So whenever you call this function which is of this use state hook, automatically the previous value is passed, which is the current value that you need to modify, which is passed in the previous age. So we can just increment this by 25, the age. So if you click this button, the age will be incremented every time you click the button by 25. So it become 50, 75, 100, all that stuff. The name will also be changed like this. We are just appending something on the current name, which is Adam. Changed. So if you want to update like this, you can follow this approach. And also this is a recommended approach in order to update your data. Now guys, we will be talking about an example where we will be mapping an actual object inside in order to change the state. So you can see that basically we will be declaring basically a simple data object here. So we will be initializing these two properties, name and age. So beforehand we were executing separately. Now we can access these properties using this data object. We can execute the name by using data.name, and similarly we can print out the age by using data.age. So because these are two properties which are there inside this data object, so we have these two buttons rendered here. So whenever we click this change name button, this automatically execute this function which is change name. Inside this we will call this function which is set data, and inside this we will pass this object, and we will be basically copying this first data object which will contain these two properties, and here we only need to change the name property. So we will change the name property to Colin Adams from John Williamson. You can see that, and rest of the properties will remain constant. You will see the name has changed as I click the button. And similarly I will go to the second function which is change age, and here basically we will be getting the previous value. So we need to change it using the previous value. So this previous value will be passed here. So this will be a arrow function, and inside it we will once again return this as an object. So this will be copied, this previous array, and this age property we need to manipulate. So we will use this previous dot age, and we will increment it by 5. So every time you click this change age button, it will be incremented by 5. You can see 30, 50, 55, 75. So in this way guys, you can also use it as an object as well in order to change properties using this useState hook. You can even hook an object. So in many situations you will have to have an object. Inside that you will have different kinds of properties, so you can even use it as an object as well. So this is a second hook guys, which is called as useEffect hook. So basically it always executes whenever we load the component for the very first time. So this can be used for numerous number of things. It can be used to fetch some data from the API. So let's suppose you are wanting to fetch some data from the API. You need to uh, render some variables such as setting the API key, setting some fetching some data from the API. You can use this hook for doing that purpose. We can even change the DOM element properties such as background color, text color. You can just communicate and change the DOM element properties. And thirdly, basically, let's suppose a value changes of a particular element, then also this hook will automatically execute. You just need to add that element as a property inside this hook. So we will be looking at the example in the next slide. So these three things this hook is personally used for. Now guys, we will be taking the example to show you how basically this fetch API works. So basically you can see that we have declaring this user and set user variable here. So basically we are making use of the use state hook here. So we are initializing the default value to null. And then basically guys, you can see we are using this useEffect hook here. And here we are making use of this fetch API, and basically we are passing this URL which is http as random user.me.api. So basically it will generate random user for us, and basically then we are making use of this dot then syntax here. So this will return the data for us, and then basically we are converting this to that data, which is we are converting this to the JSON data. And then again it will return another callback function. We can catch this using dot then, and here we will be initializing uh, we will get the data, and then basically we will be initializing to set user. So this will set the user data to us, and now we simply need to display this data inside the JSX. So we will just write here move it. So we will just write here the user is, and then inside the curly brackets we will use the json.stringify method, and then we will pass the user comma null comma 2. So in the right hand side you will see every time you can see every time the application refreshes, this will automatically generate a random user for us on the right hand side. So you can see it is keep on refreshing. You will see that it is keep on generating a random user for us. So this is a use case of this useEffect hook. So whenever the component renders for the very first time, if you want to fetch some data from the API, you can do this inside this hook very efficiently using this syntax that I have shown you. Now guys, we will be telling you guys how basically we can change the DOM properties using this useEffect hook. So we will be initializing this useEffect hook, guys. You can see that, and basically here we will have this document property here, and as you all know, inside our DOM elements, this document is the global property, and here we have this body, and then basically we can access the style property, and then we have various properties in order to set the background, text color, font size. So we will set the background and we will change to red background color. So you can see on the right hand side the background color is changed to red color, and then we can initialize some heading here inside our JSX. So let's suppose we initialize some h1 heading like some text, and after that we will try to change the text color to white color, and here we will write document.body.style.color for the text color property, and here we will change the text color to white. So you can see the text has been changed to white color. And lastly, we will try to change the font size as well. So we will again write document.body.style.font size, and here you can provide inside double quotes any numeric value. Let's suppose 45 pixel. So in this case, you can see the font size also increases. So in this way, guys, you can manipulate any sort of DOM property. You can change their styling inside this useEffect. This is also another use case of this. Now, guys, I will be telling you that how basically this use effect property executes whenever the existing property changes. So basically here we will try to change the background color from red to green. So for this we will be declaring this color state variable and set color. This will be a useState hook variable. The initial value will be red, and inside this useEffect, guys, so basically here inside this useEffect we will be try to change the, we will add this as a dependency inside this square brackets. We will write this color. So this will add this dependency inside this useEffect. So whenever this value changes of useState, this useState will definitely execute this. So here we will be initializing this color property to this document.body.style.background. So whenever this value changes from red to green, so this will automatically execute this statement. So right here inside our DOM element, we will add a simple button to change the color. So this button will be change color. So we will be binding a simple on click event handler. So whenever we click this button, this execute this function which is change color. So inside this change color, we will simply call the hook method of useState, which is set color, and inside this we will pass the value of green. So as soon as the user presses this button, this will change the background from red to green. So you can see on the right hand side the background has successfully changed from red to green color. So because why it has happened, because we have added this dependency of color inside this useEffect. So whenever this property changes, it will execute this inside this useEffect. You can even add multiple properties here inside the square brackets. So this will execute this useEffect hook. Now, guys, we will be talking about the third hook inside React.js, which is called as useRef. So basically, it is available for each and every input field out there. So it is used to work with HTML input fields inside your React.js application. So it is used to get the value which is entered by the user inside the input field, and it is also used to clear out the input fields, reset the value. Let's suppose if you want to clear out all the data which is entered inside the input field, it is also used to do that purpose as well. And let's suppose you also want to focus on the input field, you can also use this useRef hook. So it's a very important hook if you want to work with the input fields you're used to get the data or clear out the data. So we will be looking at the examples in the next slide. So now, guys, we will be looking at an example where you can simply clear out the input fields. You can get the data from the input field. So here, first of all, we will be declaring the hook here. This will be a simple input hook here. So here we will be declaring the useRef hook here. The initial value will be null here. You can see that we have declared this. And now we need to go into the JSX expression, guys. So here we need to initialize the input field here. So here we will be entering our username, and here we will be initializing type parameter to text, and inside this placeholder we will be giving enter the username. And on the right hand side you can see we have got the username field out there. After this we will initialize the ref attribute here, guys. So every input field has a ref attribute attached to it. So we will initialize this ref attribute that we have declared, which is of you can see input. After this, you can see now we will be declaring a button basically in order to change the username. So whenever we click this button, sorry, clear and focus. So whenever we click this button, basically we will clear out the fields. We will get the data also. So now we need to write if this function, we need to bind this function, which will be clear focus. So whenever we click this button, this function will automatically execute. And here, first of all, we will console log the actual element, guys, input element. So with the help of this useRef hook here, we will get access to this input element. We can simply console log this, which is input dot current. So input dot current will hold the actual input element, guys, that we need to manipulate the properties here. So in the console, you can see we have got the full input field reference here, and we are console logging it. And now we simply need to get the value that the user has entered. So we will simply console log, which is input dot current dot value. So this will simply console log the value that the user have entered. If I write something on the input field and click on this button, you will see in the console the value will be printed out, whatever I have entered inside this input field. Now we also need to reset the value. If I need to clear out the value, we can simply again write input.current.value is equal to nothing. So this will clear out the or reset the value. So if I click this button right now, this will clear out the empty. It will clear out the text that I have written. And lastly, if you want to focus on this input field, we can call the focus method inside this. So we can simply say that input.current.focus. So this will actually, after clearing out all the content, it will automatically focus inside that input field. So these are the three things that you can do with the help of this useRef hook if you want to manipulate with the input field. So if you have forms inside your application, if you want to get access to the data which the user has entered, if you want to clear out the data, if you want to focus on the input field, you can use this useRef hook. So now, guys, we will be talking about the fourth hook inside React.js, which is called as useMemo hook. So basically, guys, this hook is responsible for the performance optimization of a component inside React.js. So basically, this is useful for if you want to store the cached value of a function. So basically, if you surround your function inside this use memo hook, so basically what it will do, basically it will only execute if the value changes inside this use memo hook. If the value doesn't change, then it will serve the cached version of the function. So thereby it will be improving the optimization and the performance level of the application. We don't need to recalculate every time when the application renders, or it will only recalculate whenever the value which is dependent upon that function changes. It will not recalculate every time. So that's why the speed and also the performance level of the application improves. We will be looking at the real life example in the next slide. So now, guys, we will be looking at an example of use memo hook here. So first of all, as you can see inside this example, we have declaring this set counter variable and a to-dos variable. So the initial value of counter will be 0 and the to-dos will be empty by default. And you can see we are performing this expensive operation. We are calling this function and we are passing the counter variable, which will be empty by default. So now you can see inside our JSX, we are simply looping through our to-dos here. We are using the map method in order to show these to-dos here. And inside this paragraph, we are showing this to-do. And then we have a simple button in order to add a new to-do. So as I click the add to-do button, you will see a new to-do will be added, because you can see some slight delay is there. This is all because you can see inside this add to-do, we are simply adding a new to-do here. There is a slight delay here inside the right hand section as I click the add to do button. This is all because we are performing this expensive operation. So every time we re-render our DOM here, this expensive operation is taking a lot of time. So again, we have this counter variable we are loop embedding, and then we have this simple button. Basically, we are incrementing the value of counter. So this function will execute. This is increment counter, and below this you can see it is taking a lot of time because this is performing this expensive operation. So this is laggy, and you can see this is the counter function here, increment counter function. We are incrementing the counter of by 1. So as I click this, so it is taking a lot of time in order to update the DOM. So this is all because of this expensive operation function, guys. So let me show you this function. In this function, what we are doing here, so you can see that we are performing a lot of expensive operation. You can see we are running for loop from 0 to 1 billion numbers, so it is taking a lot of time. So we are incrementing the value of counter by I here, and then we are simply returning the value of counter from this function. So as I click this, it will take a lot of time, so this will not be good for the user experience. The people will left your website. So now to fix this, we will be using the useMemo hook. So basically it will memorizes the value of this function, and it will store it inside this variable of result. So it will not re-execute the function every time when your component reloads. It will only execute whenever the value of counter changes. So inside this we have passed this as a property of counter. You can see we have added this inside the square brackets. So this will simply means that it will only execute whenever the value of counter changes. So this time as I click, you will see instantly our to do will be added. So this will return the catch value. So that's why the UI has become so nice. You can see that every time the counter value changes, then only it will execute this function. In the meantime, it will return the catch value. So this is all about use memo hook, guys. So this is really important hook that you need to understand in order to build out React applications which are very effective and not laggy. So now guys, we'll be talking about the fourth hook which is available inside React.js, which is called as useCallback. So it is very much similar to useMemo hook, guys. So for understanding this, you must first of all understand the useMemo hook. So it is very much similar to that hook. So it is the main difference is that in the useMemo hook, we were trying to catch, we were trying to store the function value. But in this case, we will be catching the whole function. We will be storing the whole function, not the value. And the second is of all, it is used for referential equality inside our React.js application. So whenever you are passing some kind of data, some kind of function to another component, in that case, this is useful for referential equality. We will look at a complete example in the next slide so that you can understand this use callback. As you can see that, guys, we are looking at an example of this use callback hook here. So for this, we have declared another two variables, count and to dos, which will be initial value will be 0 and count to dos will be empty. You can see we are adding these two functions, add to do and add count. So inside our JSX, we are simply looping through our to dos here. We are adding this count, and also we have a button to increment the value of button. So on the right hand side, you can see there is a problem out there. You can see too many renders. So this is a problem when you are not using use callback hook. So every time your application loads, it will automatically re-render everything. So you can see too many re-renders problem will be there, and you can see we are storing these to dos in a separate component. So this is the definition of that component. So we are simply looping through this. You can see we are looping through this using the map method. We have this to do and the index, and basically every time uh, the component re-renders, this value will be re-rendering. So this is a problem. So we now need to fix this inside this add to do. We need to surround this function using the use callback hook. So this is very easy. You can see use callback, and this will be an arrow function. And basically here we will write this line, which is set to dos. So basically this will simply mean that if the to dos value changes, then only this child component of to dos will re-render, unless it will not re-render. You can see we are adding this dependency inside the square brackets, which you can see to dos. So this simply means that if to dos changes, then only we will re-render this child component of to dos. So if counter variable changes, then it will stay the same. So here we are simply catching the whole function of add to do. We are not storing a value. You can see that now there is no problem of re-render. So this is referential equality, guys. So you can see we are making a whole function as cached function, because we are not recalculating every time, re-rendering every time the value changes. You can see if the value of counter changes, then this function will not re-render. So this is a very simple example to understand use callback hook. It's very much different from use memo. Definition looks the same, but it's different. It is catching the function, not a value. In useMemo, we are catching the value. In this case, we are catching the whole function. So now guys, we will be talking about the next hook, which is called as useContext hook. So this is a very important hook inside React.js. With the help of this, you can be able to manage your state of your application globally. So inside your very small little applications, if the size of your application is not large, then you can use context hook instead of Redux in order to manage your state globally. And it is also very much useful whenever you are combining the use case with use state hook in order to share the state inside nested components. So if you are using only use state hook, then it will be very much difficult for you. But if you are using use context plus use state in combination, it will be very easy to share the state in between nested components. So if you have a lot of components inside your application, then you can share your state without having to use Redux. So we will be looking at an example in the next slide in order to understand fully. So now guys, you can see that the example of use context here, you can see that inside use context, we are using the use state hook here. So we are declaring a user variable called as Jesse Hall. You can see we are importing the use context, and in order to create a context, we are using the create context method. And inside our function component one here, this is a global function. And here we are initializing our user context provider. We are providing a value to be stored, which is user. So here we are printing out this inside h1 tag. And here we are calling the nested component, which is component 2. So this component 2 will be inheriting these properties guys automatically because of this use context. So inside this we are not printing out the values inside component 3, component 4. And now inside component 5, if I want to access this value, we will use this use context hook. We will provide the user context here, and simply we will access this value. It is so simple. You can see we are uh, we are passing these values to the nested components which are there. We have 5 components. So inside our component one, we are initializing our user context. We are providing the value, which is the actual user value that we are storing inside this application. You can store a complete object, you can store an array. It totally depends upon your own application. You can fetch the data from an API and then store it. So this is a very cool little technique using this use context hook, that you can store your information in between different components. You can even store these components in different files. It need not have to be there inside the same file. You can have different files, and you can don't use Redux for this. If you have a very small application, you can use context with use state hook in order to store information inside different nested components. So now guys, we will be talking about the last hook which is available inside React.js, which is called as useReducer hook. So basically it is very much similar to useState hook that we discussed earlier, but it's a very better alternative to useState hook for complex state management. So if you have a very complex data, not a very simple data, you have very complex data such as very large objects, the data which is dependent upon the previous data, then in that scenario you will definitely use useReducer in place of useState. So we will be looking at a complete example in the next slide, so you will better understand what is useReducer. So now guys, we will be looking at an example here of useReducer. You can see inside this code snippet we have the initial state of 0, and inside this we are declaring this count and our dispatch function here. This useReducer hook takes this reducer function and the initial state. So what is your initial state of the application? So we have initialized it to 0 at the very top. And also we have this dispatch function. So we have, now you can see we have 3 buttons out there: add, subtract, and reset. So whenever we click the add button, it will add 1 to the state, and when we click subtract, it will subtract 1. You can see on the right hand side, when we click add, it will add 1, subtract 1, and when we click the reset button, it will reset the value to 0. So these 3 buttons are there, so we are calling this dispatch method. So this will call this reducer function guys. You can see inside this reducer function we are passing the state, which is the actual data, and the action. So action can be 3 things: it can be add, subtract, or reset. Depending upon the action, we are manipulating the state. We are adding 1 to the state, or subtracting 1 from the state, or resetting it to 0. So this is the use reducer hook in a nutshell guys. So it takes a reducer function, and also it takes the initial state. It is very much similar to the concept of Redux inside our React.js. Redux is a tool which is a response which is there for complex state management, but still you can use reducer hook if you have complex state without having to use the Redux. So it takes the reducer function and the initial state, and based upon that it calls this dispatch functions. So this will call the reducer function. So this is all about hooks, guys, in this video. So thank you.